Dear colleagues, thank you for the invitation. The concept of orthodoxy is traditionally interpreted as the true faith. Orthodoxy is considered the most conservative branch of Christianity. The motivation for this conservatism is quite simple. If orthodoxy is the only true faith, then any deviation from this truth will lead to its distortion and consequently to a loss of connection with God and the essence of this religion. According to the orthodoxy doctrine, God is not subject to change, for there is nothing better or higher to which he, the absolute, could transition. According to orthodoxy, progress in technical, political, or social areas is not a value, but can be acceptable in the context of this religion only if and when it leads to an increase in the level of public morality. It is also believed that orthodoxy cannot change because it addresses the profound human essence, which is invariant and independent of historical and cultural changes. At the same time, the Orthodox Church and its parishes exist in the realities of modern society, whose values do not always coincide with those preached by Orthodoxy and are often directly opposed to them. On the one hand, the morality of European society has been largely shaped by Christian doctrine, but on the other hand, it has been significantly transformed under the influence of the ideas of the Enlightenment, the sexual revolution, multiculturalism, the intolerance, the Holocaust, postmodernism, and so on. The language of the Gospel's imagery is difficult to reconcile with the modern European way of life, and because of this, among other things, Gospel stories are perceived as narratives, fairy tales, rather than as teachings and guidelines for action. It can be said that the Gospel and the Holy Scriptures as a whole contain elements of the distant past of those countries and peoples where Christianity originated, Jewish, Middle Eastern peoples, and so on. We can say of the non-religious origin of some elements of the so-called Orthodox tradition. Yes, please stop this in this slide. The society's complaints about orthodoxy as well as other religions include the continuing master-servant relationship, the prohibition of criticism of senior church officials and hierarchs, rudeness, which has become the norm in communication between superiors and subordinates, etc. Orthodoxy in general and Russian Orthodoxy in particular does not have a clearly defined social doctrine. The well-known document, the social concept of the Russian Orthodox Church, is declarative in nature and has little application to the everyday life of foreign Orthodox laymen. In fact, this problematic, stop please, yes. In fact, this problematic topic in the possibility and conditions for the modernization of orthodoxy, which seditious for some believers, can be presented by some discussion questions. These questions you can see on this slide. And within the time allotted for this presentation, we cannot find a solution, but we are only able to identify the problematic points of this topic. The position of this issue, next slide, please. Thank you. The position of this issue shared by the majority of believers in the Russian Orthodox Church, we can cite Alexander Shishkov's publication, Old Style and Modernization of the Church in the Russian Parliamentary newspaper on 27 January 2018. According to Shishkov, the triggers for opponents of any modernization of the Orthodoxy are the church transition to the Gregorian calendar, the abolition of the patriarchate, the ban of Church Slavonic, the introduction of female clergy, the marriage of same-sex couples, and so on. The main motive for switching to the Gregorian calendar, according to him, is the desire to eat meat during New Year celebrations, but this is psychologically hinted by the Christmas fast, which follows the Julian calendar. Secondly, in matters of the calendar, backward Russia should keep pace with the civilized world, according to Shishkov. The concept that is of exceptional importance to Shishkov is tradition. He calls for adhering to the traditional old style, speaking about modernity in the language of tradition, not putting ourselves in the place of tradition, etc. Stop in this slide, please. And it is important to ask, is the concept of tradition a value in the context of gospel? Didn't Christ himself act as a destroyer of the traditions of the ancient Jewish religion when he drove the money changers out of the temple, criticized the external rather than internal observance of purity rituals, refused to stone a woman caught in adultery, and much more? Shishkov attached vital importance to the Julian calendar, not only for Russian Orthodox Church, but for all of Russia. Here you can see this text. It should be noted that the Julian calendar did exist at the time of Christ indeed, but it was not created by Christ or Christians. The calendar was created in the Roman Republic by a group of Alexandrian astronomers and was based on the astronomical knowledge of the Egyptian. What does this have to do with Orthodoxy? It is known from the history of the issue that in May 1923, a Council of Orthodox Eastern Churches was held in Constantinople, conveyed by the Patriarch Meletius IV. Among other things, the calendar issue was discussed at the council and a decision was made to reform it. It was decided to introduce a calendar called the New Julian calendar. This calendar was developed by Milutin Milankovic, a Serbian astronomer and professor of mathematics and celestial mechanics at the University of Belgrade. In 1924, the decision of the Council of Constantinople was implemented by churches of Constantinople and Romania, and in 1928 by the churches of Alexandria and Antioch. The Russian, Serbian, and Jerusalem churches refused. Currently, 10 of the 15 Autocephalous Orthodox churches use the New Julian calendar. None of the known calendars has any doctrinal or dogmatic significance. However, the celebration of Christmas by the entire Christian world at the same time would be considered a manifestation of the power and vitality of Christ's teachings and the Christian doctrine as a whole. Despite their declared refusal of the church, stop please. On this slide, despite the declared refusal of the church and church-related circles to make changes in Orthodoxy, it can be stated that certain innovations and nevertheless taking place. For example, the celebration of high liturgy, of night liturgy from 31 December to 1 January. For Orthodox Christians, the best way to celebrate New Year Eve is not at a table with drunk friends, but at church. Popularization of the celebration of Saint Spiridon, a service in his memory, again at night, has recently been solemnly performed on the night of 25 December to prevent attempts by the Orthodox Christians to celebrate Christmas according to the Gregorian calendar, or alternatively to celebrate with the whole Christian world, but on their own holiday. the service of prayers before the start of the new school year, the weakness of fasting. I noticed if we analyze the Orthodox calendar publications by Moscow Patriarchate from the 1970s and 1920s, we can see that the requirements for fasting have been relaxed. From a complete ban of eating on the 6th January, the eve of Christmas, to permission to eat food even with vegetable oil on this day. From permission to eat fish on Wednesdays and Fridays only during the period from Easter to Trinity Sunday, to permission to do it throughout the whole year. From a ban of eating fish on the feast of Annunciation, if it falls on Wednesday or Friday, to its permission regardless of the day of the week. Relaxation of requirements for preparation for communion, from the need to fast for even days for 7 days before communion to 1 day, from the prohibition to receiving communion during fasting due to unworthiness to the practice of frequent communion throughout the year. Reapproachment between the Orthodox and civil secular understanding of personal freedom and dignity. For example, I have read in a material in the text, the severity of obedience in a monastery should not destroy the personality of the monk. Attitude towards wealth, from preaching the sinfulness of wealth in the Soviet period, in the Church of Soviet period, to denying the moral connotations of money as such. It is important how money is obtained and how it is used, and others. Attitude towards television, from a negative attitude towards watching television programs to the use of television, the media and social networks to teach orthodoxy. As for the other triggers of the modernization of orthodoxy cited by Shishkov, these innovations are not a factor that is truly necessary and truly expected of the church by society. The demand for modernization usually means updating, moving towards a more civilized state. Society demands civility and modernity. In terms of values, this means humanism, understanding and accepting people with their weaknesses and vices, mercy, love, compassion, respect for elders, striving for spiritual improvement, etc. Margaret Mead, as it well known, considered mutual assistance, compassion, and care for others' neighbor, especially in difficult times, to be the first sign and foundation for a civilized society. The society doesn't expect from the Orthodox Church the acceptance of same-sex marriage. It expects much more, to be a measure of honesty, non-opportunism, non-greed, mercy, self-sacrifice, to tell the truth and be on the side of the truth, even especially when it differs from the opinion of those in power. It is precisely the lack of absence of these qualities that provides material for criticism. Scandals involving the sale of cigarettes, watches, cars, justification of war, of aggression, etc. The loss of the church's niche in public life and calls for the modernization of orthodoxy. Thank you.